What I've been asked to cover off today is problem waste for councils. So what I'll go through with you today is some of the sources of those problem waste, where they come from, the types of waste that you encounter in the council space, some of the programs that are available, and potential solutions. With the time constraints, I'll just try and pick on a couple of examples on the way through. Hopefully it's give you an idea on how we can engage at all levels and how council can involve themselves with the various programs that are available, and also the waste industry and service providers that can actually help you to solve your problems. So when I looked at waste that councils may encounter, I thought, well, there's obviously your own self-generated waste. You have depots, you have trucks, you have equipment that needs to be managed. So that became one of the areas which would generate oils and rags and paints. So how do you fit that into the scheme? The other area I came across, which I didn't realise probably myself how big an issue it was for local governments, was the illegal dumping. And obviously that would be quite prevalent in the local government space. Reading up on some of the literature, you get over 100 incidents per local government per year, which is significant, costing in excess of $500,000. How do you address that sort of issue? Well, I actually saw out the front, and some of you may have come across the guys that have the surveillance cameras. I thought, well, that's really what the gist of what I'd like to talk to you about today, and that is that you as councils need to engage as well. I heard Glenn and Janet talking about, come and talk to us. I've heard various people in the stewardship space say, come and talk to us, we're there to help, and that is true. The same applies to the waste industry and a lot of service providers. If you think about where the councils sit and where a lot of these organisations are, in New South Wales alone you have in excess of 140 odd local councils, and councils being what they are not easy to navigate their way through at times. Waste is generally not somebody's job in most businesses, so it can be quite challenging for industry to find the right contact, the right person within that. Most of the organisations and stewardship schemes that you deal with are national, so for them to be able to get around not just the New South Wales councils and get the message out of what's available to locally to New South Wales but also nationally is quite challenging. So what I would encourage you to do is to actively engage with the industry, with the EPA, with the stewardship schemes that will be able to provide you with a lot of help in this area, and that's a classic example. These young blokes that have come up with the surveillance camera. Now, I think he said one surveillance camera costs about $5,000. Obviously you can't cover all the areas, but there's a deterrent factor if people think that they may be able to may get caught dumping stuff. I looked into, perhaps some of what are the reasons for the illegal dumping that's happening. One obvious one is the actual cost to the person that's doing the dumping. Obviously, if you don't get caught, it's a free activity. So that becomes one of the drivers. Access to the facilities, which I think is something that's really been addressed well in New South Wales. The guys from the New South Wales EPA have done a fantastic job of making these services available to the broader community, communicating that message out. And, I saw the stuff that Janet put up on promoting it. Lots of the stewardship programs are also striving to promote it, but I would encourage you to do the same. And on the whole, I believe people do want to do the right thing. It's often just in the absence of knowledge that they will take the easy route through it. So continue to promote it. It's a really important part of the communications that's required. So going through the different types of problems that you may encounter. Obviously there's the risks that are associated around hazardous chemicals, safety, health and environment. What I like to say, I've been in the waste industry for a while and in some sites that carry significant amounts of hazardous stock. And when people look at it, they tend to become a bit gun shy. So when we take community people around, just general population, so you don't really see anything in these sites that is different to what you see in your normal households. It just happens that the volume's so much more significant than what you see in your own average household. What does that mean? Well, it means you have to have stronger controls around it, because the risk is that something goes wrong, the magnitude of the issue obviously is a lot greater. Therefore, that's why we see these programs like the CRC programs, like the mobile collections and waste companies that are engaging with generators to make sure that this is covered off. With the greater volumes does come greater responsibilities. You've got risks around fire, risks around environmental impacts, pollution, health exposure to workers because of the volumes. And one of the big issues that comes up is housekeeping. I think the days of when I'm old enough to remember when we'd back a trailer up to the face of an old quarry, offload our garbage onto it, and then wait at the end of the day for the dozer to push it into the hole. So that's changed. That's long since gone. Obviously, our CRCs and other sites are much more sophisticated than that. But there still is a psyche in the community, I think, that it's a dump, and we've got to educate our constituents to say, well, this is not a dump, it is actually a CRC, or it is actually a recycling centre. And that will be the challenge for us, because so long as we think of it that way and we don't consider them to be chemical recovery or resource recovery centres, then our constituents will think along the same sort of lines. So again, I would just encourage you with the housekeeping to make sure that that is of paramount, because that sends a message clearly to the community that this is not just a dumping ground, it's actually a resource recovery, and it's important that we don't just drop things in the nearest receptacle and think that we've done our job as far as waste disposal. From a compliance point of view, GHS was introduced across Australia from January 1 this year. It's an issue for councils because you need to be compliant with it, you need to observe it. Why did it come about? Well, it's a global thing that was introduced to try and streamline labelling. We had lots of different labelling across different countries, different regions. It's tried to simplify the way that that hazardous goods are managed, so that we have a streamlining around the hazard that's involved, or the risk that's involved in it. In New South Wales, you could contact WorkSafe, or Safe Work they're called, for assistance in this area. If anyone still isn't across it, we're now 4 or 5 months into the year, so most people are hopefully across it, but as I go around, I said there's still lots of places that are probably not really across it as they need to be. So like all these things, seek out some help. I hear Glenn say, seek us out, talk to us. Well, the industry is more than willing to help you, consultants are more than willing to help you, but you need to have a voice, and as a rule, people in the industry don't bite. So I know it's not always easy, but I would encourage you to actually engage with the various bodies. You've also got licensing issues that you need to be compliant with, so everyone to be aware of their licences and what actually it entails. So understand the types of waste that you have, what your limits are and what you likely need for service. The program that you've got here with the CRCs is obviously fantastic because there's trigger points there for you, but even the councils that don't have a CRC, understanding your volumes and how your frequency of delivery will go a long way to making sure you remain compliant within your EPA licences. The impact on housekeeping, is paramount in this place, because how can you manage it? Well, the volumes, understanding those, having the right sort of containers for the right sort of materials. So again, that's something where I saw a lot of people, a lot of exhibitors here over the last couple of days that have really cool solutions to lots of problems, and we just need to engage with them and understand what it is that they can bring to the table for us to make it so that we are considered to be a professional space, that waste is not just something that goes in the nearest receptacle, but there are dedicated places for them. It obviously has the added benefit, most of these, if they're designed for a particular material, that you will be able to contain the waste. You minimise the risk of spillage and any impacts that you might have on the environment, so it becomes a really important space. You saw the list of identified wastes, and when I looked at what the identified wastes that were there, just about all of them had a stewardship scheme of some sort attached to it. I talked to a lot of these people in the stewardship space, and they're really eager to help and get involved, but again, it's just they're generally run very lean as organisations. They have minimal coverage from a out in the marketplace point of view. So if you engage with those people, you will find that they'll be able to give you some good advice. And generally speaking, a lot of these programs will end up saving you some money, adding some real value to your constituents, which is, at the end of the day, what councils should be trying to do. One of the parts that I wanted to touch on with you is the chain of custody. It's probably an area that has historically been neglected, and that is you have the waste on site, and I think it's important that you're aware that once that waste leaves your site, that's not the end of the picture for you, that you need to do your due diligence around how the material's being transported. Is it safe? And where's it ending up? Are we optimising the process? Are we getting the maximum resource recovery out of whatever waste products are leaving the site? So again, I would encourage you to do your due diligence on your downstream and not just think about once the truck leaves your site, that's the end of this case for you. Why do you need to do that? Well, there's a few things that you need to consider in that space. Getting a hold of reputable suppliers. There is, obviously lots of suitable waste companies across Australia that can provide services to the councils and are able to, but there's obviously still some that are prepared to take shortcuts. You want to minimise that. You need to do the work around that. Understanding what requirements you need to meet from that point of view. And also, as Glenn mentioned, that training aspect. Don't underestimate the value of training and ongoing training, because you will turn over staff, and as new staff come on board, they need to be trained and aware of all the requirements. That's how you run a tight ship in this space, because generally speaking, we are dealing with chemicals that have the potential to cause harm to either people or environment, so we can't be flippant about it. Some of the solutions, I didn't want to talk all doom and gloom. Obviously the CRCs that you've got run out here in New South Wales is a fantastic program. I don't know that everyone in the councils realise how lucky they are. I get around the country a bit and I see, like, Victoria has about $3 million discretionary spending in this space versus the $70 million that's in New South Wales. Queensland has nothing. Walga over in Western Australia, very little as well. So you are blessed with what is a really well-funded program and opportunity, and I believe the model that's being rolled out is really strong too, about getting that infrastructure right, getting the capital investment in so that you'll have long-term solutions. That is all covered on your waste list program. Some of the stewardship schemes, and it's funny, are all directly related to those problem wastes, and I've heard the people talk about the various stewardship schemes, about their willingness to try and they're all seeking the volumes. The challenge in all of us is trying to consolidate markets. In the waste space, especially, we have lots of households with little bits of pieces that we're trying to get to a centre that we can get a critical mass of stuff out. And one of the ones that's not listed as a waste with you guys, but we're obviously fairly close to, is in the e-waste space, and with ANZRP and the various co-regs that we come across, and finding incredible challenges in that space, because every household has various amounts of phones and e-waste, but it's so fragmented as a market. We've got to try and find a way of consolidating that and transporting it to a suitable processing facility so that we can recover the resources out of it. And that presents a big challenge for all of us. Again, that's why I would suggest that you contact these organisations, get engaged with them, and you'll find that they are more than willing to help. covered off the program, but I thought this was pretty cool I just saw all the different delivery that's already been on your scheme, and there's some pretty cool numbers in there. I'm not going to go through them all, but the funding that's been available is quite extraordinary, and I encourage you to tap into it. As Glenn said, the next round of CRCs that come around, if you're not sure about it, engage with them. Find out if it is for you, because you will find that people in that space are more than willing to help. One of the things to consider is on your sites, and as an example of receptacles, what you see there is what's an approved segregation device that we had developed, which can transport materials such as paints or other materials discreetly from other materials, and that's a challenge in our space because a lot of materials are not compatible with each other, but to try and get that critical mass together is quite difficult. So why we need to do these, I'm just getting a wind up, so I'm just going to move along, but the importance of it is, and I thought I'd just put this through as a demonstration of why we need to do our due diligence and why we have these devices. This is and it's actually happened in the West, but a truck where it was no fault of the truck driver, but the truck ended up on its side, as you can see. Because because they were using those approved segregation devices and the right sort of equipment, that took about 2 hours to clean up. Imagine the consequences if you just had the material sitting on a pallet or something and we ended up contaminating dirt, land, environment. We'd be there for days. We'd have the road closed off. So there's a lot to consider in the downstream, what happens there as well. This is just another one I saw. E-waste, it's neat, it's tidy. E-waste I've seen in various sites around, it's generally a messy looking waste stream because of its nature, but you put it into the right receptacle, it doesn't look too bad. So get out there amongst the industry and find out what's going on, and you'll come across some good stuff. The services that we can provide include a forklift on the back of the truck, which can be really handy in some of the remote areas where you don't have access to a forklift. So a lot of the trucks that we have, that's just an innovation that the industry came up with as a way of delivering the service to industrial customers as well as councils. I'm moving along now, John. So there's lots of processes available in the waste industry, some which you'd be aware of, some of which you would not be aware of. I'll sort of touch on two quick ones that are new for our area. One being the blue box technology, which we've built a site down in Dandenong in Victoria, which takes e-waste and basically shreds it and breaks it into its resource constituents. We're in the process and nearly built it's nearly finished a similar one in St Mary's in New South Wales, which will be operational within the next couple of months, which will also have attached to it an optical sorter. If you think what we're doing in the downstream space is we're just trying to break down complex retail items, consumer goods that have got lots of different components to it, and we're trying to break it into its elements, and this is what a blue box does. If you can see here, down the bottom here you have a separation. This is material that's come out of a blue box, so it's just one example of technology. Also in that space we're able to capture the mercury vapour that comes out of the next generation of e-waste, the LCD screen. So historically that space has been covered a lot by enterprise resources where we're using disadvantaged workers. The challenge is that we're probably going to be exposing them to stuff that we don't want to be. So as we move forward, this sort of technology will be a big advantage in that space. And the second one and last, we also run because we do a lot of activities in the household chemical space, we end up with a lot of paint and a lot of paint that we need to handle. So we have what we call a HazPack unit down in Laverton in Victoria, which if you see there in the bottom right, what you have there, it's a densification process. So we're crushing steel cans and extruding out any liquid paints from within it to again separate the steel from the paint. And what you have there is a cross section of it. You can see that it almost looks like a fingerprint. It's been densified to the extent, and then each one of those, when they come out of the unit, it's about 70 kilos, and we end up with paint that we can then send off to resource recovery, whether it be energy recovery or paint. I'm just about done for you. So we're also just about to finish what we're calling HasPac Mark II, which is again in St Mary's in New South Wales, which will be able to service all the paint that comes out of the New South Wales market and segregate that down to its elements as well, which we've seen as really important because we consider New South Wales as quite a significant market for us, and that will be launched in the next couple of months as well. So anyone that's interested in those activities being involved in the launch coming along, you'd be most welcome to see it. We're happy to show people it. We'll be giving a launch for it, so get in contact with us if you're interested, and we'll make sure you get on the invite list. And I got there.